Welcome. Today we are going to talk about the book review assessment task. So firstly, what is the assessment task? It is your job to prepare a 500-word book review on a novel that you have read this term. The aim of your review is to critique the book that you have chosen. To critique means that you will need to point out both the positives and the negatives before deciding on your recommendation. The elements that you must include in your book review. Ensure that you have an attention-grabbing heading. Have the text details, so a summary of the characters and plot, and include a star rating. You should include your initial reactions as the reviewer, and then go into more depth explaining the strengths and weaknesses of this particular book. You should end with a short conclusion, which tells us whether you do or do not recommend this book to others and what it is similar to and who it may be appropriate for. The success criteria which you'll be marked upon includes how well you organise and structure your review. 2, what you include in your review. Is it a detailed review? Do you go in depth about the ideas and language in your book? 3, you'll also be assessed on what you have already completed, which was an analysis of the front cover for marketing purposes, and overall between your poster and your book review, how well you use the conventions of English language. Sometimes people work best when they have an example. While we work today, I will show you an example which is about terrific terror in 200 pages. Make sure that you are following along as we go. Step 1, include a catchy heading and star rating. Let's look at my title. It says Terrific Terror in 200 Pages by me, Ashley Cavanagh. It's my review. Then how many stars? We can see I've given this book 4 out of 5 stars. We can then assume that this will be a positive review. You should start with some text details, a summary of the characters and the plot with no spoilers. You should include the author, the title, the year of publication, what genre this book is, the plot and the characters. Again, it needs to be short and succinct. Let's look at the model. I'm here today to review crime thriller 13 by Steve Cavanagh. Published in 2018, this is the 4th book in the series about New York criminal attorney Eddie Flynn. This novel is a quiet on the edge of your seat read, as Eddie defends Hollywood actor Bobby Solomon, who is accused of murdering his social media influencer wife and their security guard in an act of vengeance. See how that didn't give away the ending though. Your next paragraph, and you should leave a line before going on to this next section, is your initial reaction. What drew you to this book? What are the important things to know about this novel before I begin reading it? And what are your overall thoughts about the novel? You can go into more depth later, but this is just initial reactions. Let's look at my initial reaction. Part of the reason I picked this novel was because of the cover and what it revealed about the plot. There was a quote which said, "The serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury." Immediately, I was intrigued to see how the serial killer was connected to the Hollywood murder trial. And this novel certainly had next level drama with murder, police corruption, an FBI pursuit, and more. I rate this novel positively. I like to read a book that has twists and turns. The language is easily accessible without too much legal jargon, but just enough description to keep it interesting. So I don't go into depth about my reasons, but I do indicate that this will be a positive book review. This is where I can go into more detail. You should have 2 separate paragraphs for the strengths or pros and the negatives or the cons. Now, these should be full sentences. You need to make sure that you really explain what you didn't like about it. If you say that you didn't like a particular part of the book, why? If you say that you did or didn't like a particular character, why? If you did or didn't like the main message or the writing, why? Make sure that you maybe include some quotes in this section. That could also be really handy. Let's zoom in and have a look at my pros and cons. Pros. Firstly, Eddie Flynn is a likable character. He's intelligent, but also relatable, coming from a background as a con artist and then working his way up to be a successful lawyer. Everyone loves an underdog, don't they? Moreover, the character accused of double homicide, Bobby Solomon, and his deceased wife also add a modern element. You can imagine this being like the O.J. Simpson trial that in part led to the infamy of the Kardashians. In addition, the chapters change point of view every second chapter. While some people might not enjoy this, I think that it kept the plot moving along, and that you get a real sense as a reader that you know something that Eddie doesn't, as an alternative narrator is the serial killer. It keeps a great sense of tension. Finally, this novel keeps you guessing until the very end about who is involved in the murders and the cover-up. I like that this is signposted. Firstly, moreover, in addition, and finally, to highlight my 4 points. And each pro has an explanation. For example, I say Eddie Flynn is a likable character, but then I go on to say why. Because he's intelligent and relatable and everybody loves an underdog. You want to be able to do that if you want to receive an A or an A+ on this assessment. Let's look at the cons or the negatives. If you don't like blood, gore, or suspense, this isn't for you. At times, I didn't really enjoy the parts where violence was described. I think this could have been done with more creative descriptions and less graphic ones. The book carefully wove a tangled web of corruption. Bit by bit, information became clear to the reader, and I liked this element of suspense. But the ending happened so quickly. We went from being in the courtroom to having the final showdown in only a few pages. I would have liked to see the ending unravel more carefully. It was like, bam, and it was over. It wasn't clearly marked on the cover that this was the 4th book in the series. I didn't read the first 3 books before starting. The story is standalone, but Eddie is the protagonist in all 3 previous novels. And some things happen in his personal life in this story that must link to the first stories. If I had my time again, I'd probably read them in order, but it really doesn't impact the understanding or the enjoyability of the novel. So we can see there that I've outlined 3 things I didn't like about the book, but I went into detail about what I didn't like, why I didn't like it, and then I offered a solution or a recommendation to how it could have been better. For example, I said I didn't like the blood or the gore, but I said here that it could have been done with better creative descriptions. Or like here, where I said that the ending happened really quickly, I then said that it could have unraveled more carefully and that would have made it better rather than the rushed final scene. So it's important, if you are saying some negatives, that you also give some feedbacks on what you think could have made this better. Let's move on to the final section. The conclusion. You will need to write your closing point. Again, this is a separate paragraph. In a very short and succinct way, summarize your likes and dislikes. You want to use some different vocabulary here. You don't want to repeat what you've just said. I want to know if you would recommend it to others, who you think might like to read it. Even if you are giving a negative review, maybe someone else or a different group of people might find this interesting. And is it similar to any other books or writers? Let's look at my conclusion. In conclusion, I would certainly recommend 13 by Steve Cavanagh for others to read, if you like crime and suspense. It's quite similar to the work by Riley Saga, which are standalone novels with simple yet shocking crime stories with good plot twists. I'd probably say this is for readers 15 and over because of the violence though. Thanks for listening to my insights, and I hope you enjoy the novel as much as I did. So your finished review should look something like this. See how I've color-coded the different elements to make sure I've done everything correctly. I've got a summary in purple, I've got my initial reactions in green, the strengths in blue, the weaknesses in yellow, and my short conclusion at the bottom. It's paragraphed and set out neatly. If you would like to use subheadings, that is also okay. Once you have finished, you might ask, how do I improve my draft? Well, head to the editing list on the class page, and there are a few tips there to help you. Firstly, check your work against this class example. Do you have all of the elements? Have you got sentence starters like moreover, in addition? Is your work in paragraphs, or is it all together? Do you need to spread it out? Is it about 500 words long? Once you've checked all of that, you might want to add more detail to your pros and cons. Let's look at my example here. It shouldn't be a short list of likes and dislikes. You must explain each point. For example, I really enjoyed the character of Eddie Flynn. Well, what else? Because he was intelligent. Well, when did that happen? He showed this through his skills in revealing the serial killer. It was complex thinking. Great. You could also improve your language choices. Instead of saying like or good, what else could you say? What better words could you use? Find synonyms and replace boring words with more exciting ones. You're supposed to be a reviewer. Instead of saying, I liked the ending, you might say, I found the conclusion of the novel entertaining. It says a bit more about why you liked it, and it's a bit more formal by using the word conclusion. Add further descriptions to your writing. As we just said, use more adjectives to describe the book, how it made you feel, how the plot unfolded, because you want to have an exciting review. It should have a bit of personality to the writing. Instead of saying, I am reviewing the novel 13 by Steve Cavanagh, well, can you add a bit more detail? Say, today I intend to analyse the crime thriller by international best-selling novelist Steve Cavanagh. Bit more interesting. Lastly, you may wish to get some feedback from a friend. Let them have a look at your review and let them know and ask them, where can I make this more exciting? To finish, check that you have finished your book review. Ensure before you submit it that you have edited using the editing tips, particularly to upskill your language and to make sure that you have detailed points. Ensure that you have submitted both parts of your novel review on KC. If you have any questions, make sure you ask.